Chapter 6. The next morning I woke to the sound of dishes clanking on the other side of the den door. It was still hazy outside in the early morning, and I was not ready to be up. But I was a guest, operating on someone else's rules and schedule, so I dragged myself out of bed and tumbled into the kitchen. "Good morning," I muttered, rubbing my eyes. Grandma B was standing at the stove frying eggs. Grandpa Howard was sitting at the table eating eggs. "Hungry?" Grandma asked. I realized I was starving. Delicious as the ice cream had been the night before, it hadn't stuck the way a real meal would have. "Sure," I said, "but I can make something for myself." Grandma gave me a look that told me to zip it, so I sat down next to Grandpa waiting to be served. It was kind of nice, actually. Most mornings before school, I was the one helping my sister get her breakfast. I'd carefully pour Amelia's cereal. She didn't like when any of the crumbs from the bottom of the box made their way into her bowl, and get her a glass of juice, and then we'd sit and read our books while we ate breakfast together, just the two of us. Dad used to be around in the mornings, but after he started nursing school and I was old enough to be left home alone with my sister, Dad's schedule turned into a mess. He had classes and went to the library to study a lot, and he had also picked up a job helping out at a nursing home to make ends meet. Mom's job as a lawyer, the boring kind, not the stand up and shout and perform in a courtroom kind, meant she was out of the house and at work by 7 most days. A few moments after I settled in at the table, Grandma slid a plate of eggs and toast toward me. Then she perched in the seat beside me, no plate of eggs for herself, and looked at me. I pretended I didn't notice her staring. It was kind of weird having someone watch you eat over easy eggs. "Would you like to take a trip to the lake today?" she asked me finally. "It's supposed to be warm, so maybe you'd like to swim?" "Maybe," I said. I wasn't a good swimmer. Deep water was one of the many things that terrified me, even before the fire. But I didn't want to start blurting out my fears on day one. New Maya didn't do that, I reminded myself. Maya, the brave, wasn't allowed to have fears. "We go to church at 9 on Sundays," she said, after another long silence. "Do you have anything nice to wear?" I swallowed a big bite of egg, mentally rummaging through the collection of borrowed and donated clothes in my suitcase. "My friends and I weren't really the dress-up types. I don't think so." "That's okay," she said kindly. "Maybe we can look through the lost and found bins at the high school after school's done for the year. There might be some stuff you can take and wear to church while you're here. Until then, you can wear something of mine." I put my fork down, suddenly a little nauseated by the eggs and conversation. "Yeah, sure," I said, just to be nice. But I had no intention of pawing through the lost and found bins for clothes to wear to church. In my real life, I had clothes of my own, and I didn't go to church. We usually spent Sunday mornings cleaning the house or reading in bed, or sometimes we had Amelia's gymnastics meets or my soccer practice. Just 2 Sundays ago, I'd played doubles tennis with Anne, Isabel, and June. We are all terrible, but it didn't matter. Then we biked together to our favorite ice cream shop. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd been to church. But here in Thistledew, I guess I was a churchgoer. After breakfast, I called home to check on my sister. "Nothing's changed," Dad said in a whisper, explaining that Mom was asleep in the chair beside Amelia's bed. I asked if he needed to go, and he said he probably should, but he promised he'd call me later to get the scoop on things in Thistledew. And then we hung up. There was no mention of my drip candle, no talk of blame, but I felt sick thinking about it anyway. How long would it take for them to figure out the cause of the fire? I stared at my cell phone for a few minutes, wondering what all my friends were up to back home. The weather was supposed to be nice there this weekend, and I knew a few of them were going into the city to go to Shedd Aquarium and out for fancy dessert somewhere. I was still in the loop enough to know what I was missing. For a second, I considered replying to one of the many texts or calls or group chats that had popped up on my screen over the past few days. But I wasn't sure I could actually talk to anyone without making myself physically ill, and how could I explain my current situation in a quick text? Eventually, I decided to text Beckett and Anne, my 2 closest friends, to tell them that the cell service in Thistledew was terrible, a lie, it was surprisingly good, and that I was sorry. I was sorry for so many things, but I couldn't figure out how to explain to my friends why. just like I hadn't been able to talk to Dr. Bob or Dan or John or whatever that hospital therapist's name was. In some ways, it was easiest not to talk to my friends at all, because then I could divide my life into there and here, then and now. I'd already decided it was going to be easiest if I just pretended my real life didn't exist, to try to make this summer something separate, even though I knew the world was moving on without me. That way I could forget about home for a few minutes at a time. Before either of my two best friends could reply, I threw on a pair of sweats and trekked out to the backyard to check on Big Bear. He wagged his tail and bounded towards me. I was relieved to see he hadn't up and disappeared in the night. I guess part of me had expected something awful to happen, but that was the old part of me, the part that worried about things I couldn't control. New Maya was supposed to trust that the wandering dog would be fine. New Maya was an optimist who wasn't scared of bad things happening. Eager to get started on my summer dog training project, I worked with him on fetching. This was a fairly simple game where I tossed a stick and he picked it up, which seemed like a skill he'd been born with. Then I tried to teach him to sit down. This was a less elegant process than the fetching. I waited until he sat down on his own, then hollered out, "Sit!" Most of the time, as soon as I said the word sit, Bear popped right back up to standing again. I tried pushing his big fluffy butt down while repeating, "Sit, sit, sit," over and over, but he didn't seem to understand the exercise. He was a good dog, though, and never jumped on me or barked. That felt like a win, so I gave up on sit for a while and decided to give him a little break for just being born good. After I'd poured some food in Bear's bowl, I went back inside and borrowed a nice shirt from Grandma to wear to church. Luckily, all her slacks were too big for me, so she let me get away with wearing June's jeans. I wasn't the only one at church in jeans, but Grandma told me that wasn't the point. Church didn't last nearly as long as I'd expected it to. We were done and on our way home before 10. Now the rest of Sunday stretched out ahead of me, with nothing on the schedule. We bumped into Griffin and a person who I assumed was his mom on our walk home after the service. He was wearing a button-down checkered shirt, and someone had obviously wet down his mop of hair and tried to brush it into submission. He looked miserable in his fancy church clothes, but perked up when he saw me. "Hey, Maya!" He scampered over, tugging at his top button. "This is my mom, Wendy." "Hi," I said, smiling my parent smile. "She prefers to be called Wendy," Griffin declared, "instead of Mrs. anything, since she still has my dad's last name, and she doesn't like it. Mom, this is my friend Maya, who is staying with Howard and Bee, and whose house burned down." As soon as he said it, his hand flew up to cover his mouth. Wendy looked at me with sad eyes. "Oh, hon, I'm sorry. Griffin shouldn't have brought it up." She put her hand on Griffin's head and steered him under her arm. "It's okay," I said, and meant it. It was nice to get the facts out in the open and not pretend I was just here in Thistledew for a fun summer vacation or something. Grandma grunted. "We all know what happened, so why ignore the topic?" I looked at him, surprised to hear the usually quiet old man say exactly what I was thinking. Grandma artfully changed the subject. "Wendy, I was thinking about taking Maya over to the lake this afternoon, show her the beach and give her a little tour of the area. Would Griffin like to come along?" "Please," Griffin begged his mom. "Please, please, please." I could see Wendy sizing me up, possibly trying to decide if my family's bad luck was contagious. I'd noticed some people doing that after the fire. I bet Wendy was thinking, if I send my son off with her, will he suffer the same awful fate her sister had under her care? After a long moment's consideration, Griffin's mom looked at Grandma and said, "Sure, I need to clean the house this afternoon, which would be easier without my little mess maker around." "Do not recycle my fork," Griffin shouted. "It's not trash. It's my greatest treasure." "Here's the deal. I won't touch your boxes," Wendy assured him, "if you promise to take those swimming lessons at the lake without grumbling this summer." "No deal," Griffin muttered under his breath. "I don't swim." "What's that?" Wendy said with a laugh, holding her hand against her ear like a funnel. "Sure, you say? Sounds good, Mom?" "We can discuss this at a later date," Griffin declared. Laughing, I decided I already loved this kid.